Hello, my name is host Eric, and I'm the host of Talking with Famous People. And today's topic was requested or suggested by Tensa, and it's about nihilism, moral nihilism. So first I'm going to make the nihilistic argument in favor of nihilism, and then I'll explain to you my response to it. So there are a lot of individuals in the world who will attempt to compel us all to adhere to some given moral framework. They will say that, in fact, we all default to a moral framework because we all behave basically ethically. Most of us do, according to their frameworks. However, individuals who want to make this sort of claim have an extraordinarily high burden to meet. First of all, those who would say that there are singular ethical frameworks that can adjudicate matters successfully fail to account for the fact that none ever has in the history of mankind. Throughout the history of mankind, all ideologies have done is promote bickering and dispute amongst individuals, which is neither morally good nor bad, can be inconvenient for those of us who are trying to go to the store. So, the thing is, first of all, I would point out the fact that for all those individuals who are trying to make claims to an objective moral reality, that number one, if it were so objective, why can't we agree about it? And number two, if in fact things are morally right or morally wrong, then if I get away with something and and it's morally wrong, what happens? But it's not legally wrong. Should legality equal morality at all times? Whose morality? The issue here is you've got deontologists telling us that we ought never to lie. We know that moral framework is wrong. It's obviously wrong because there are plenty of circumstances in which it only makes natural human sense to lie and attain obviously likely to happen predictable outcomes. We can dismiss utilitarianism in part because it must assume that you predict right every time to get it right, but we can also dismiss deontology because sometimes we do get it right and it is obvious what we can predict. So where exactly do these moral claims come from? Where are these moral frameworks that, like deontology, utilitarianism, or natural rights framework, or any of those kind of frameworks, where in the world are they coming from? Well, they're coming from human beings, and yet they're expressly desirous of being universalizable. But you can't have a universalizable moral law when individuals approach the issue of morality differently. Some individuals approach it from a personal framework, some individuals approach it from a group framework, some individuals approach it from a expectation of the self framework. So how in the world can we have a universalizable moral code when we don't even have individuals expressing their own moral fantasies through different modalities? It makes no sense at all. Thus, the only logical conclusion to draw is that all of this talk of morality is just a bunch of mumbo-jumbo trying to generate some false frameworks to support what fundamentally is the fact that humans are social creatures, they're herd animals, and so it naturally makes sense as a species for us not to attack each other all the time. It's just that simple, and there's nothing more to it. To believe that there are objective moral truths is no different than believing in God. You can't even believe in an objective moral truth without saying that what makes it objectively factual, despite the fact that it's metaphysical in nature, is that it has some sort of metaphysical legitimacy. Where are you going to get that legitimacy from except from a creator? You can't. So that's why we have to embrace moral nihilism. Okay, well, first of all, trick nasty, most people don't think aesthetics can be objective. And most people don't think the morals can be objective. I'm making the nihilist position here that morals can't be objective. Aesthetics is a different issue. And why are they different? Well, because moral issues are those that potentially demand, impose upon, transgress, or otherwise impact others in ways that are non-consensual of the other, usually. So it's a little bit different area. But let's not get sidetracked into aesthetics. Let's talk about this issue of nihilism, all the arguments I just made. The arguments in favor of skepticism, which say that all those things I just said. Basically that we shouldn't. We should stop worrying about morality as an abstract system and start worrying about just behaving as human beings. Our behaviors are neither right nor wrong, but that doesn't mean we can't acknowledge the fact that we're going to feel empathy and sympathy and things like that and behave accordingly. We shouldn't try to induce in ourselves bad feelings of guilt and displeasure because we're doing things we want to do that don't make us feel bad otherwise. Okay, so Tensa says, no, they simply view moral claims as false. I'm trying to give them more credit than they're getting, I guess. I don't know. I'm trying to make the best arguments I can for a generally nihilist perspective. All right, so they're saying making moral claims are false, but you can have your own subjective moral beliefs. All right, but those moral beliefs being subjective, you can say I'm choosing to engage in behaviors that I deem moral, but I don't deem them moral for you. I mean, it's a much weaker position because. Okay, well, let me explain why nihilism is not accurate. First of all, we exist in a world in which some individuals make claims upon justifications to behave in certain ways against other individuals, to transgress upon people, to use violence or whatever. Those claims necessarily are adjudicated according to some kind of a framework. So denying that these frameworks are real, quote unquote, means committing the exact metaphysical error the nihilist accuses the moralists of making, namely to prioritize an abstraction over objective fact. So, I mean, it immediately runs into its own problems. So if you're gonna be morally skeptical and you're gonna say there's no morally right or morally wrong things, then you're going to say that those instances in which we appear to be adjudicating moral claims, we are not doing so. But if we're not, then what are we doing? Are we just playing blackjack or something? I mean, we are producing outcomes from those processes. Somebody might go to jail. Somebody might not go to jail. It would seem as though we're adjudicating moral claims. So if not, what are they? Okay, well, those are legal claims, Eric. Okay, fine. Can I make a claim that a law is bad because it causes harm? Well, you can make that claim, but it's bullshit. Okay, but it's a claim based on a utilitarian calculus, right? Yeah, but that doesn't actually tell us what's absolutely right or wrong. But we do come to some sort of conclusion using that, right? Well, yeah, but it's a wrong conclusion. Okay, but it's a conclusion about what exactly? About whether somebody did something that was right or wrong, whose fault it is. Do you agree, nihilists, that causality is real? That if I push something off a cliff, it falls to the ground? That I have caused something to occur? If nihilists believe in causality, then they really run into some fucking problems with their skepticism. Because, of course, we know that behaviors can occur that take place on a moral scale. And in fact, according to Tensa, we know that according to them, they can have their own subjective moral beliefs. But here's the thing. You have to come up with some sort of reason to prefer one subjective moral belief over another. And as soon as you do, you're entering a moral framework that you're utilizing to justify the subjective moral belief that you claim has no meaning. And it can't be evaluated accurately through a moral framework. But there's no other way to evaluate it. In fact, the whole issue of skepticism, the whole issue of nihilism is responsive to a moral framework that it then says isn't real and doesn't exist. Or at least is non-universalizable. That it's not objective. Okay? But the problem is, if it's not objective, then is it not possible for people to make better and worse decisions regarding issues that are known currently as moral issues? So if I stole a cookie and you killed 50 people, is it possible to say that it's unfair for the cookie stealer to get 100 years in prison and the mass murderer to get a $50 ticket? Is it possible to say that? Well, it is. Is it less true or more true than the alternative? Well, you can say it's not if you want to, but I mean, you behave as though certain things are fair and unfair according to a certain comprehension of what fairness looks like, right? Now, that might be subjective according to you, but you apply it to people other than you, and you expect others to behave accordingly. So, if it's just subjective, do you ever complain if something bad happens to you that's unfair? Do you know what I mean when I say something's unfair? That's the interesting thing, is to be a moral skeptic and to still know what it means to talk about morality is an odd phenomenon. Well, we wouldn't want to do that thing. That is awful what you're talking about, but it's not objectively immoral, Eric. It's not. You can't use a system to determine that it's actually immoral. Yes, I can. I have a system for that, specifically, that does determine that. And it determines it consistently. And it's going to produce much more accurate results according to yours and mine and anybody else's intuition than any other results. Now, your intuition says, I don't like absolutism, and so I'm going to oppose it with mush at all times. That's what the nihilist position says. It says, I'm going to arbitrarily oppose mush on the grounds that my mush is less mushier. But the problem is their mush is way more mushy. It's not less mushy. It's nothing but mush. There's nothing there. It's not even a critique of an existing normative system. It's a denial of the need to debate that point. And to think that they don't have to debate that point is wrong. In a practical world, since they have to debate it, we're debating about some people. They're going to agree that some people can have a worse understanding of an ethical question and a better understanding of an ethical question, even if only according to their own self-interest. And if that's the case, then isn't that what they're advocating for? They want to avoid a framework, and it's called nihilism in the sense that it tries to negate everything. But in doing so, it's agreeing that negation is possible. And if negation is possible, then non-negation is also possible, which requires us to compare the two things. To compare the two things, you need what? A framework. In fact, you can't not have one. It's impossible. You're going to have some sort of framework. It's just going to either be undeveloped or well-developed. Shitty or good, Nihilism is a particularly shitty framework. It falls apart at the slightest touch. There's nothing to it. So that's the gist on that. But if you heard at the beginning of the video, it can be argued pretty well if you try. If you know where the holes are, you can set it up so it's hard to poke all the way through. But it's definitely bullshit. You wouldn't want to run it as an actual case. It's like a last ditch shit. Like, oh, are you losing the round bad? Run skep. But it doesn't. It never flies. Thanks for watching Talking with Famous People.